So I thought maybe we did introductions on day one. And so we're not going to do like full introductions, but maybe you could say your name, however you want us to call you. I think we taught each other our Indigenous names, many of us did. And then tell us what language you're working in. And then just say one thing about making language materials. And it should be a sentence. I'm not looking for your great speech. You can save that for later. So let's start with that. So just say your name, just say what language you're working in, and say one thing about making language materials. Okay, go. Let's go first.
This is Asani.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Clinic name is Asani. The last name that I received from my grandmother was Akta, but I like Sani. It's really an easy name. I'm studying Tlingit, and I wanted to create curriculum that integrates storytelling with information technology, specializing in GIS.
Okay, sheesh. Who's next?
I can go. I'm Frank or Kosh. I go by either one. I'm studying Tlingit, and I think one thing that's really important about making language materials is patience. A lot of it takes a lot of patience, just from the small experiences that I've had.
Okay, sheesh. And then
I could go. Sanjat Hinadikyal. My name is Sanjat. I am studying Hadkil. And I think one thing that I've learned about making language materials is you need to just have the confidence to print it. That's the biggest thing is, trust yourself, I guess. I guess that's advice to myself too.
Okay. How
I'm Katie Turner. The language I'm working with is Degshna, the language of the Daguetan Athabascan people in the interior. I'm really new to making language materials, but I'm kind of just thinking of like what really helped me like in those kind of beginning stages of getting into it, and just different ways of like learning how to make a lot of like the sounds is like a really big thing I'm focusing on, since like kind of where I'm targeting is like just like younger like students at home, a pretty small community. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep going.
I can go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh. Please excuse me. I just came from the dentist, so I have gauze in my mouth. But Hook Youngston Dewayu, David Roger Lang, Gumshawam, Dewam, Simshian, studying Somalia. My name is Hook Youngston Simshian, David Roger Lang in Somalia. I am, which I'm studying in the Language Pathways program. Something that I've noticed in generating materials, and something I'm interested in pursuing is shooting for sort of a middle age, early high school age, where it seems like there's a real drop in enthusiasm, where kids get cool. So looking for ways to one area that I certainly see a focus in is right there in being and areas that I see them that they are engaging in and keeping them as things like memes and just using current technology, TikTok and memes and things like that to really engage that particular group.
Excellent. All right, let's keep it going.
I'll go. Godam Teben, Dawayu, Ligi, Victoria McCoy, Amshiwamp, Hazaushida, Shulakshu Shamalia. My Shamalia name is Godam Teben, Heart of a Sea Lion. My English name is Victoria McCoy. I'm working on Shamalia. One thing that I wanted to try was all the curriculum that I'm making, just to make it fun. I asked one of the Shamalia teachers in Taekwondo, David Nelson, if he had any advice for me on making curriculum and doing lessons for first grade. He said, make it the best thing you do all day. So what I got out of it was to make it fun on, I was gonna try to do a sequence, but I'm really not sure if I'll stick with that. I think right now I'm just gonna go for it and do the best I can to make it interesting for the kids. And direction.
Direction.
I've been working on trying to build a curriculum for Yauk or canoes, and I found it's easier to like come up with new ideas and like how else to make it, but it's just making it is like the hard part. Making everything the next step, it's all on my own time, and it's pretty time consuming, but it's worth it, I think, to see it someday in a class or a lot of classes. The goal.
Okay.
I'm Kuchain, and I've been kind of following Herb with the Yauk and just step behind him and making the models. And I, you know, in a high school, I noticed, you know, all of the curriculum that they have a lot of words and a lot of, you know, posters, but there wasn't really anything for carving. And then ones that I did find, I found out that a lot of those words are kind of substituted. So it'd be good to get a lot of those common curriculum for carving back. Sheesh.
Okay. Sheesh.
Job. My name is Lauren or Kuginktu, and I'm interested in maybe working on like children's books that are in Haida to help teach the language.
I realize that we're introducing ourselves, but it sounds like there's an additional prompt. What is the prompt?
Yeah, so what language you're working in, and then just one thing about making language materials.
Oh, login. Slawijung. Atlas SSD ganang login. Nungskutas hinu had kilti ki ang. Joseph Hilaire Jr. hinu yats atai kilti ki ang. That's out Lukwang Andlai Edward Nagang. Hi, my Haida name is Nungskutas. My English name is Joseph Hilaire Jr. Wait, I want to double check the prompt. Yeah, I am in the Hayu Hatangi Dei language pathway program, revitalizing Hadkil. And that's really cool. We're talking about language materials because I currently am making my own yearly planner in Hadkil. So I have 2020 Hadkil, and then I used a quote that means still believe in good days. And like all of the months I have are in Hadkil and the days of the week. So yeah, that's one thing I'm currently working on, but I think one thing I would like to start doing in this new year kind of echoes on with what Hookyoungs was saying. I didn't catch it all because I was late, but it had to do with like making content on the internet. That way it can reach, the material can reach a wider audience. How
Oh,
Dr. Sinudikian. Um, I'm working on the Haida language. What I would like to do as far as curriculum is to pick up where Dr. Irma Lawrence left off. Her and Dr. Jordan Latchler did the Alaskan Haida phrase book. And Dr. Jordan Latchler hinted that they could have gotten thousands of more daily sentences in the book, but because of time, they were pressed for time and it had to go to printing. And also Kuyan from Heidelberg said there's an infinite amount more of sentences that could stem from the Alaskan Haida phrase book. So my goal is to continue with everyday sentences you would use in everyday life. Awa.
Hoa.
So Sid, and I'm at work right now, so we're wearing masks. I hope you can still hear me. This is my colleague, Shelly Charles, and she is from Metlakatla. Anyway, so I'm working in Tlingit Yukatangi, and what I have found is that when I work on history, that's sort of like my focus and culture, understanding more about the language and place names is all relevant, and that plays into it. So yeah, language is kind of the root of it all. And that's what I hope to preserve when I have the opportunity to teach children.
Okay, let's cheese. Anybody not go yet?
Hi, I'm Lori Gach Ansan Yuchat Duasak Kiksadi Ayachat, and I'm the music teacher at City Tishanach, and really grateful that I can be a part of this class in some way because I teach club in 10 minutes. So I'm taking the class in a different way, but hope to be involved as much as possible. And I'm learning the Tlingit language, and one word is collaborative. Collaborative, and so appreciative of all the people that have helped me. So, cheese.
Sheesh.
I'm Nila Torah. I also go by Anna, and I'm learning Tlingit. And when we were learning Japanese, we had drill sessions twice a week, and they were kind of intense, but kind of really fun. And that's something I'd like to try in Tlingit.
Okay, let's cheese.
Yaktushi Akhsai. I'm studying Tlingit Yukatangi. I'm thinking about making language materials. I'm all for games, so I always like to keep it interesting for the kids. And I know somebody had mentioned earlier trying to, once you kind of hit that high school age, still trying to make learning language hip and cool. Kind of cheap.
Sheesh. Who is left?
This is Youngston. I'm studying Tlingit, and one thing I really want to do in the schools is like throw worksheets out the window, nothing like super academic by the Western standards, and just have the kids learning the language through doing. So acting, harvesting natural medicines, learning about the plants, learning the traditional place names, learning through play and place-based education, and making it really fun and engaging, and introducing the language as much as possible and integrating it through the arts.
Sheesh. 3 left, maybe 4.
Ja, tuksha ke hinu hatkis iskian Tlingit kiang. I said my Haida and Tlingit name is Tuksha Ke, and I am studying Hatkil. And one thing that I want to say about language materials is that I think it's completely doable that language, even the tiniest amount of language, can be put into any subject. So, yeah.
Hoa. Jinkasi.
Eighty Jinkasi.
Oh.
Oh no, she's not. You were frozen.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's not coming through. Oh, yay. I saw that. Oh, Dagon. It's a good day
Sorry, I
for
don't know. I hope you guys can hear me. My internet says it's unstable.
Oh, there it is. It's mostly not coming through. You might try turning the video off. That might help. Okay. Noea, you want to go?
Sure. I'm. What's the prompt? I'm Nawea.
Name.
I'm studying. Oh, I'm
language.
studying Tlingit, and then what was the third thing? Sorry.
One thing about making language materials.
One thing about making language materials. I don't know. I guess I just need more practice. Even just like for myself, I'm not super good at like being like, this is what will be really useful for my learning, and I should, study this. So I don't know. Yeah.
Sheesh. Jinkasi, you want to try it again?
Yeah, sorry, I had to connect to my personal hotspot on my phone. My internet's unstable at home. Jin Kisiach Sai, Tlingit Yuchatangi, Shtuchtu, I'm studying Tlingit. One thing that I have learned about making materials is if it's not just photocopying and taping and photocopying things to paper, just so students can do like connecting. I just noticed that students really engage when they've got their hands on something. So learning and giving them an activity to do has been the funnest part of learning for me and working with students in elementary.
Yay. Sheesh, Hawa, Doixen. Khonea Aksai. Tlingit Yuchatangiti Nijachane. Achtuasako Hoa. Hatkil Kalsamalgech. We Yuchatang Naya Yijachanetsu. My name is Khone. I work in Tlingit, but I want to work in Hatkil and also work in Smalgech. I want to learn them, and I also want to use them, and I also want to contribute in ways that that I can. So we're trying to set up probably a similar system for Hatkil that exists for Tlingit, which is really a blog that points to YouTube and a Google folder. And I'd love to do the same thing for Smalgech if that seems like the way to go. It's just all about like creating accessibility and trying to remove. Well, I think a language should be hard for one person to control. And so I talked a lot of strategies with the folks in Hawaii about how to develop something that is hard for people to take over and kind of make it their thing. That way it just belongs to a whole bunch of people. Because then I think that's how you build a movement, and we need a movement that takes all these languages from a place of struggle to a place of just incredible power. One thing I'd say, I guess, about like, well, I'll say two things. And so I get to cheat. So one is just take it to the end, get to the end of it and get it out the door. And two is don't see it like it needs to be some big, huge, perfect machine. We're not building the Death Star. We're just building a little thing. We just got to build a little thing. And then that thing contributes to all these bigger things. And you should have this goal of just cycling through planning, designing, implementing, assessing, and then redesigning. And so that you just fix things. So don't ever feel like things need to be perfect to get out there, but do operate in an area where you have chances to critique and assess. And yeah, that was great. That was wonderful. So I thought today would just sort of share some things. I don't know if you all brought something, just to show us an example of some curriculum, some piece of curriculum that you think is worth sharing. And if you don't have anything, that's fine, because I've got some stuff to show you folks. I thought also I would walk you folks through the primary things that I'm currently using for tools to make things for teaching Tlingit. And so that was today. And then starting next week, we move into our schedule of looking at readings on Monday, looking at curriculum on Wednesday. So the other thing is, you know, there's about 19 of us so far, maybe 20. I have to check the list, but we're gonna have to divide into groups. And so I think there's gonna be 4 groups probably, so that we can all, and what you're basically gonna do is make something or finish something. But I'm hoping you're not gonna bring something that you've already, that's pretty much done, right? Like we want some kind of newer stuff. But that doesn't mean if you've been working on it for a while and it's just, you haven't taught it yet, let's finish it and then bring it here and show it to us. But when it's your turn, try to make sure that we are looking at something that's pretty much like, here's the scenario. We're all working this dream school that's operating completely in the language that we want it to. And we're just the faculty, and you're just sort of showing us this thing that you're going to be using tomorrow in class. And so you're showing it to us and we're giving you just some feedback. Oh, this was, you know, and the type of feedback that we're going to give is, we're going to start off by saying just some really great things about it. And not like every single person who talks needs to say something nice and then something critical and then something nice. But we're going to start off, someone just says something specific and nice and that was effective and that was working and that you liked. Then we're going to move into this additive type of critique. And that means we're not going to give empty criticism. And this is something I do see in Indigenous communities. We're like, oh, you're doing it wrong, or oh, there's errors, but then you don't really say what's that. It just, we have this tendency, I think, of as Indigenous peoples of just sort of, what do they say? I think there's like some kind of saying, maybe it's from Japan. It's like the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And so sometimes we get into this habit of like just kind of cutting people down for even just doing stuff. And I want us to be conscious of that and moving away from it. So what we're trying to do here is just sort of give suggestions on ideas, sharing ideas, being collaborative, as somebody said. And so in this environment, if you really want a successful environment, you just got a group of people. I mean, there's language schools out there that have lots of teachers, lots of staff, and lots of administrators, and they all work in a language. And well, I was in Hawaii, and there's Mauna Kea. So Mauna Kea is this big sacred mountain on the island of Hawaii. And these guys are trying to build like this big telescope up there, and there were protests because they said that's a sacred mountain. You guys got like 12 telescopes up there, just stop. And so there were these huge protests about it. And it was actually a fairly divisive issue because the university was backing this project along with some pretty substantial corporations. And they had a lot of money and people getting arrested. It was pretty hardcore while I was there. There's video of like a Hawaiian police officer arresting an elder and crying while he's taking his elder into custody. And the arrest was an act of defiance. But I went to this one teacher training, and then at the end, they just went all day, just making curriculum, testing stuff out, talking about their theories for the upcoming year. Every year they shut down their language nest and they take a month off, but in the middle of that month, they all get together and have this week-long session. They're going all day long. It's all in Hawaiian. So at the end of this, then they all go out and they just, they cut loose, and they're at this little bar that's near there, and they're singing Hawaiian songs and hula dance and just letting off all this steam. It was great. And at one point they start singing this protest song from Mauna Kea, and everyone's making this symbol of the mountain. And it was so powerful. Like they were singing, I was like, let's go kick everybody off the mountain right now. I was so fired up just by how much unity I felt. And I was talking to one of my teachers afterwards. He said, oh, well, only half the people in there don't want the telescope. The other half want the telescope. I said, but it felt like we all didn't want it. He says, yeah, it's because he did it in Hawaiian. If you're going to do it in Hawaiian, we're going to do it together. And so that's what I want us to move towards, is this true sense of unity, this true sense of togetherness and camaraderie and collaboration. And so that's just sort of continuing to set the tenor for what we're trying to do. And I know, Ansan, you've got to go, Chish. For this first set, so let's take the next 5 weeks. How do you folks want to work together? You want to group up in languages? Do you want to just sort of, maybe just divide us into groups of 5 and just do one thing on your own? Maybe we should start with that. Just do one thing on your own. So next week, we're going to have 5 lessons. So if we're going to have 5 lessons per week, we just got to look at the time. 90 minutes. What is that? Anybody know how to divide 90 by 5? How many minutes is that? 18 minutes each. Is that right? Is my math okay? So you should target your lesson for, I think, let me double check. Maybe I should ask Siri or Alexa or somebody. Look at that, 18 minutes. Stayed in my head while I was talking. Okay, so because there's transitions, there's feedback, there's other things like that, I really think it should be about a 10-minute lesson. And I think you really need to be mindful of the clock out of respect for your colleagues. Because if someone ends up going last and they only have 3 minutes, that's not what we want. And we want to try and get through everybody. And so the goal here, just keep this in mind, it's totally not graded. The only way it's graded is like, did you do it? A+, great job. That's it. But you're going to be presenting something, and it should be pretty close to a finished product. We don't want something that's like, obviously it started at 1 p.m. on the day that you were presenting, and I trust y'all. I just want to put this out there, that when it's your turn, just really make sure. And then when it's not your turn, make sure that you're here and you're focused, right? Because this is your opportunity to be part of a team and provide feedback to someone else who's showing you stuff. And that's the whole intent of this class, is spend half our time reading about theory and examining different aspects of language revitalization and looking at curriculum sets from other languages. Then the other half is just trying a bunch of stuff out and just getting a chance to sort of chat as a group. So I think it makes sense to start as individuals, who maybe in the future we can do a few sort of, maybe we'll work in small groups or something, and don't feel like there's going to be some final projects, I think, where you would have an opportunity to be pretty holistic in terms of like, here's the Haida language team, we're presenting our final project. And and I know some of us are working in smaller groups, and so I don't want it to feel like it's unfair. But you can certainly work with anybody you want when it comes to the final projects for this class. So let me start a Google Sheet so that we've got some sort of process. And while I'm doing that, does anybody have any questions or thoughts on those ideas?
can we work with our cohort group? Like if I'm in a group of 5 and there's 2 Haidas and 2 Tlinkits and 1 Simpsian, that'd be great. But for language, we would have 3 different languages. I don't. Anyways, I'm thinking cohort.
Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, I think we should try it. Well, how about this? Feel free to work with other folks, but you're responsible for presenting it on your own. Does that make sense? Just for this first 5, these first 5, oh wait, am I doing the math right? These first 3 weeks, I don't do numbers. I don't know why. I can sometimes. Okay. There's 19 of us. These first 4 weeks, we're gonna all take turns presenting individually. Now you can collaborate if you want to, and you can work with anybody you want. It's not like you have to go in a room and come out after you've sat by yourself with this magical piece of curriculum. Work with whoever you want, but you're the one who has to introduce it to us. And so when it's your turn to introduce it to us, you've only got 10 minutes. So what I would like you to, and we could maybe do some longer ones after this first round. We'll just see how it feels, how it goes. But I want everybody to have a chance to present. And I'll have some final numbers for us. But for these first 3 weeks, I would like you all to just, and basically, it's not like you're gonna stand up there and act like you would teach this to the class, but instead you are presenting this to your faculty, to your colleagues. Say, hey, I got this idea, guys. Here's what I'm gonna try to do. So here's the handouts. Here's how we're gonna start. Here's how we're gonna do the thing. Here's how I'm gonna give feedback. And you're gonna walk us through how you're gonna implement this. So really it's just a brainstorm. That's all you're doing is just brainstorming with us. But the way we're gonna think about this is it's gonna be ready to be implemented the next day. And of course, it's up to you if you wanna use it, go use it. But feel free to collaborate. Feel free to work however you want. And then as cohorts, we should probably, as cohorts, you guys should be probably talking about how to set up some individual sessions to do some of this work together as well. Because the final project, if you guys all wanted to collaborate, and then there's really just these, and we'll revisit what I'm talking about with the final projects, but does that make sense? Sorry, if I sound confusing. It's because I'm confused.
The only thing I need clarity on is the math and the time.
You came to the wrong place. Okay. So I think that there's probably about 20 of us in the class. And so what we're going to do is we're all just going to sign up for a spot. We're going to take 5 spots for each of the next 4 Wednesdays. So that should add up to 20. If we end up with 23 people, then we'll just stretch it out another week. But because of that, if it's a 90-minute session, so these are for the Wednesday classes, for the next 4 Wednesdays. So for the next 4 Wednesdays, this is what we're going to do is we'll just sign up and we'll go in the order that you sign up. So I'll put a link in to the chat in a second. And so there's 5 people who go every Wednesday, right? So you're going to have 10 minutes to present your lesson to us. And you'll just share your screen. You can just show us the handout. So you don't have to go find a printer or anything like that, but you should have it kind of, you're showing us what you're using. You're talking to us about how you're going to use it. And then you're talking to us about how you're going to determine whether this was effective and what kinds of things you might have to change. For example, if it was my turn, I might give you this handout that shows these kind of, what do you call them? Ecosystems, right? So I've got this picture and it shows, let me just show you. I'll just do kind of an impromptu run through, but I gotta go find the thing. Okay. So let's say, just for example, it was my turn. So I might show you folks this and say, okay, so my idea for what I'm going to teach tomorrow to middle schoolers, right? So try and identify what your age group is. And these are totally fictional scenarios, right? But you should be identifying to whom you were teaching, and then just sort of talk to us about the process. And so I'll say, okay, so I'm going to be teaching ecosystems in Tlingit. So what I've done is I've created this illustration, and then so here's the mountaintop, here's the upper part of the mountain, here's the lower part of the mountain, here's the forest, here's the beach, here's the tidelands, here's a reef, here's the water, and then here's the deep water, like where the halibut live. And then over here, there's an island. Here's the land. And so what I want to do is I'm going to start with the students, and we're going to just sort of, we're going to spend tomorrow learning the names of these. And then the next step is we're going to learn what kinds of plants are here, and then what kind of animals are there, and then what the animals are eating, and who's eating whom, and who's eating what. And then we're going to go through each of these zones and just learn plants and animals. And then from there, we're going to go back through and we're going to learn some behaviors and some other stuff and talk about which ones are foods for us and which ones are medicine. So this whole thing was inspired by what I saw in Hawaii as well. So I'm going to develop a Quizlet to see if they can just remember these names. But that's the goal, is just teaching them the names of these things. And so I'll give them some blank maps so that they can write on them, and then we'll just keep working on these names. Something like that, right? I also want you folks to know that I can show you guys how to create something like that, depending on what kinds of illustrating skills you might have. And I also, let me put this in the chat while I'm thinking of it. Okay. So I keep a folder for Tlingit curriculum, and I'm building one for Haida curriculum. And there's a couple things that I do with this folder. One, it's a Google folder, and anybody can access it who has the link, and but nobody can edit that, because I don't want anybody to accidentally delete anything or change something. And there's quite a few original files in there, like the original Illustrator files for that thing I just showed you is in there. But it's an open use thing. If you're working in a language, go use that stuff. There's hundreds of images. You're looking for an image of any kind of animal in Southeast Alaska, I probably got it in there. And if I don't have it, you can let me know and I'll go find it. So, but I'll show you. If you go to that, this is what it looks like. There's lots and lots of folders, but you can go down to language images and illustrations. And this is where I keep a whole bunch of stuff. Now, I just want to talk for a second about using illustrations. If you're teaching a language in a school, you have quite a bit of kind of open use, although some people might get grumpy if you're using their artwork or other stuff. So it's good to secure permission. If it's a photograph that's on a public entity, like the state of Alaska, the Department of Fish and Game, the US Fish and Wildlife Service or Park Service, that you could pretty much use that stuff. And so those are public federal government agencies and state agencies. And so especially if you're using it for education. But if you're going to publish something and if you're going to have people buy it, like let's say we end up with a curriculum book, it costs money to print it. We're only selling it for the cost of printing it. You could still get into some legal trouble if somebody says, hey, that's my picture of a porpoise and you didn't ask me for permission. And so one of the things that you can do is use stock images. So I have a folder in here. So again, this is the Tlingit curriculum folder, language images and illustrations, and there's stock images and stock illustrations. So you could go into the stock images and depending on what you might be looking for, here's here's a black bear, I think. So there's several things in there. And so it's usually alphabetical. I try to name it for what it is, but I really like to have kind of image consistency, just so that if you see a bear, then they see kind of the same bear every time. It doesn't have to be every single time, but I'm a fan of that sort of consistency, and you can get pretty good images of stuff, but there are some things like porcupines look different all around the world, so you might have to kind of dig around for the right porcupine. But I want you folks to know that's there. Y'all can use it. It's pretty open. The stock images, like you could download them all, use them however you want. Everything in the beginning Tlingit handbook is in there. Everything that I use for like illustrating things is in there in terms of illustrating language materials. So there's no need to there's some things that we don't have to reinvent. We all live in a pretty similar environment, although not all of us have the ocean. So, the ocean might not be there. Okay, other thoughts? Okay, let me get the sign-in sheet right. It's almost right. Okay, can you folks try this link and see if you're able to put your name on here? So here's what I'm trying to share. And you're just gonna sign, there'll be 5 spots. So here's next week. Get a calendar.
Mine says view only.
View only? Oh, okay, hold on, let me fix that. Let's try it again. Sorry about that. Yeah. Can't count and I can't type. Okay, maybe try hitting enter if your name isn't showing up. Or I could also put your name in there maybe if you want me to.
That's what I had to do. Click enter.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
in there right now. Oh.
So this should cover us for this first set of curriculum presentation. So it's just a lesson. Just think of it as a lesson. Feel free to work with each other. Feel free to ask me questions. If you want to show me stuff before, you can. But this is, just keep in mind, this is a workshop environment. It's not like you're going before the, you know, they did this thing in Hawaii as well. It's really fun how much they respect. They call them their kapuna, their elders. And some of them are and they're teachers, like people who've been teaching since the 1970s, you know. And so it was fun because one time we were all giving presentations in a class, and then you could tell how big time these teachers were, because when they walked in, everyone went, "Ooh," you know. And so they had so much reverence for them as teachers. Oh, let's see. If you're still not able to access, you might make sure you're using the second link that I sent in the chat instead of the first one. And if it's not working, you can just let me know. I could. Oh, okay. Yeah, or try refreshing. There you go. Sorry. Might be still locked into the non-permission one. But they sat down one time and they had these big kapunas sit down, and they divided the story up. And maybe I told you folks this before, but they reenacted the story. But it wasn't a high pressure situation because the ones who made them laugh the most were declared the champions. And so I don't want you to feel like this is a high pressure situation. So nobody's judging you. You're not trying to win any sort of competition. There's no Shark Tank judges. It's just, you're just sharing stuff with your peers. And then we're just experiencing that, and also giving you some feedback. So it's not even like you have to necessarily teach us these things. Your mentality should be and we're faking it a little bit, but that we all know the language already, and you're just showing us how you're going to use this stuff. Any questions about anything regarding that?
So on the day that we put our name on, that's what my computer froze up and everything shut off on me here. I missed a few minutes there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if I see your name for next Wednesday, so that's when you go. It's next Wednesday. But then you don't have to present again for, you know, there are quite a few of us. The next one we do will probably be maybe working in pairs. We'll see. We'll just sort of talk amongst ourselves and see how it's going. And yeah, so I'll count up the names. I'll make sure that everybody's on there. We'll send it to the folks who couldn't be here for the whole class. Oh,
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
For the presentation, I did this in another class and it worked. Can I do a YouTube video and then hit play when it comes time to present?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of you, if you're going to be presenting regularly and teaching, and I did have the dates messed up. So if there's dates involved, I'm probably going to mess it up. So, but it looks okay now. So I think I had February 3rd in there twice, maybe. I'll blame Google. It's Google's fault. It's a faulty system. Okay, so yes, absolutely. And if you're going to be using YouTube in a classroom, one thing that I do recommend is using Google Chrome. And there might be things in other browsers, but if you use Google Chrome, there are some add-ons that you can get. It's kind of an extra technical step. So if you're not really good on technology, but there's an add-on you can get to Google Chrome. It doesn't cost you money, but what it does is when you go to, I'll show you because I was looking at this, I was sharing this video with some folks today. So sometimes when you want to share things on YouTube, there's some different strategies. And as you share your computer to classes and students, there's just some strategies to keep in mind. One is make sure if you have personal information on anything that's closed. Like if you're working on some sort of car loan or something, like you don't want that to accidentally show that to everybody. It's just good practice. The other thing is YouTube tends to keep track of what you watch, and then they suggest a bunch of things over here. So like if you just sit around all day watching people fall off of skateboards, like that's your own business. You don't need the whole class to know that. And so what this add-on does is it just makes that whole thing blank. So nobody sees what the suggested videos are. And also turning off autoplay and stuff. That way when it hits the end, it doesn't go. And then the last thing is some people activate commercials on their YouTube channels. So make sure that you go and you've got it loaded and you've played it. And if there is a commercial, watch it all the way through. That way, when it's your turn to present, you don't have to have people watch like some kind of grammar commercial or whatever the types of things might be. And let me see. I'll find what the extension is. It's called DF2, Distraction Free for YouTube. And so, and there might be other ways to do that, but that's one that I found just because I just watched talk shows at night, just little clips from talk shows and Key and Peele and stuff like that. And that's my business. Nobody needs to know that. Any other questions, thoughts? Let's see. Anything else that's messed up on the screen? Does it go 1 to 5 every time? Okay. Great. Does anybody have a
quick question?
Oh, go ahead.
So I think I showed, was it last week, a little bit about that Yauk, like drawing the profile and then the paper model. And there's another one where like anybody could do at home with just a piece of paper, pencil, and a ruler. But if we're gonna walk through that, should I send a link out to that or just share it on the Google Drive with everybody, like what I've made so far, or email it to everybody to print out?
I would probably say, well, that's a good question. Maybe for now, just showing us on the screen. But another option, let me think. So what I could do, so maybe I can create a shared folder in our class. So that our class has its own kind of Google folder. But I could create a folder for lesson materials if we want to just sort of put stuff in there when it's your turn. So it'll basically say week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, or maybe I'll just put the date on there if I can get them straight. And then if it's your turn to present, maybe you can put a copy of the stuff that you're handing out in there in case folks want to print it or have it. I guess my preference would be we don't expect folks to have it in hand because it's not like we are teaching them, but we are showing everybody what we're going to go use to teach. So it's not like I'm going to have everybody, we're not practicing teaching this to folks. We're actually just sort of presenting it to a group of peers to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. What do you folks think of it? What do y'all think?
That makes sense. Yeah, and I can totally remind the show on the video or something.
Okay. And but it's a neat idea to sort of have some of these things. Like I really like this idea of like if something gets made, we can actually adapt it to any Alaska Native language. You know, like some stuff might be really specific, like if it's clan specific or form line stuff, that might not apply to everybody, but it certainly could apply to, you know, Southeast Alaska. So I really like the idea of just sharing things. So there's a bunch of stuff that I've made, and I'm always happy to share the templates of it, like instructions for washing your hands. Like if we wanted to make that in other languages, like let's do it. So so yeah, so I'll share a folder that we can all use to keep stuff in if we want to. Any other thoughts, questions?
I had another one about like what you were saying, just getting something done and out the door and like ready to use. And I feel like with this, because I talked to like TCLL about it at one point, these little paper canoe models, and just, you know, it's simple, it's easy, something kids can get sent home with. But where's the point to where like it can just be, that's all they're doing? It's just learning what they are, how to fold them and cut them and make them. Is that like the end of a lesson, I guess? I don't know where like the start or finish is.
Yeah, sure. Like, so it kind of depends on the content that we're teaching them. And so, and I also want to bring up that there's a lot of cases where cultural knowledge and language knowledge are kind of intertwined. And I want to make sure that we are presenting language lessons. So I'm not going to be presenting to students, like if I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to teach students tomorrow how to cut dry fish. I'm like, okay, but that's not a language lesson, right? The language lesson will be like, I'm going to teach them how to do it in the language. Then you got to show me how you're going to do something like that. So the goal is like, here's the scenario. We all work in a language medium school in the language of our choice. This is our dream world, right? So we are working in a Haida language medium school. That means everything is taught through Haida. We are working in a Tlingit language medium school. Everything is taught through Tlingit, in Somalia and Dagenhaq. So like that's our scenario. So, but it's kind of a bit of a fictional scenario as well. And so, but maybe the situation is, oh yeah, this is for kids who don't know the language, but we're gonna teach them. And so we wanna start by, we're gonna have them make this canoe, but then the language lesson is I'm gonna teach them the word for canoe. I'm gonna teach them the word for the tools that we use to make canoes. And I'm gonna teach them about the parts of the canoe, like the front, the back, the inside, the bottom, stuff like that. And then, so that would be the actual lesson. And I also wanna talk about, like, if you're showing a video or something, like, you don't have to show us the whole video, although just give us a link so we can watch it on our own. But if you've got, I'm not trying to say you need to teach this lesson in 10 minutes. You need to tell us what the lesson is. So in this scenario, we already know the language, which is probably totally fictional in a lot of cases, right? But the idea is you're going to show us the thing that you're about to go teach. That's the sort of scenario that we're using. And we could try a different scenario later where you can actually practice teaching the whole thing to us. But just in the interest of time, since there's 20 of us, you're really just going to show us the focus right now is on developing language materials. And that could be, I'm going to use this YouTube video that's already out there of these two elders talking. They talk for about 15 minutes. So after they talk, then I'm going to start asking the students about some of the things that they talked about so that I can make sure they were listening and that they understand these words. And then I'm going to teach them this. And then later we're going to go back and watch the video again. So really you're just sort of presenting us with what you're going to do, but you're not actually doing the thing. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other thoughts or questions about what we're going to do? So I want to make sure here is the class folder. The curriculum sharing folder isn't really set up in there, but I'll probably set it up in there. Because most of the folders that are in here are ones that you can only view. But I'll set up one that you can edit so that you can drop stuff in there if you want to share it with with the class. But I also want us to think about our readings. So we have 3 things to read over the weekend. An article called Atlas of the Mind. Let's see, I'll show you folks what these things are. So here's the first one, Atlas, an Atlas in the Mind, oops. And it's 18 pages long, and so this is, but technically it's probably 36 pages long, if you were thinking of a book. But just sort of, that's how long that thing is. So we're gonna read that, you're gonna read that, and we're gonna talk about it. Here's Dr. Michael Krauss, The Status of Native American Language Endangerment, from a book called Stabilizing Indigenous Languages. This is the book that put me on the path to work in languages back in probably 1994, I think is when I encountered this book. So this one is 6 pages long, so it's quite a bit shorter. And then Planning for the Survival of Linguistic Diversity, this one is 33 pages long. So just keep that page length in mind. As far as complexity, this one might be the most complicated just in terms of having some linguistic stuff in there. But I want you to make sure you have read these 3 things by the time class starts on Monday, because we're going to talk about them one thing at a time. And we're going to talk about them in terms of how does this relate to my work in language revitalization, both now and in the future. So when you go through and you're looking so here's the folder for our class. I'm going to save the chats from our Zoom meeting. They'll be saved in here. This curriculum folder, this is where you're going to drop stuff if you want to share it with folks. And then here's the readings that we're going to be doing. So this is week 2, next week is week 3. And then here's copies of the recordings if you want them, but they'll be on YouTube as well. Here's the schedule, here's the syllabus, and then here's our curriculum sharing schedule. And if there's anything else that we need, I'll probably add stuff in there. I've got extra reading if you folks are looking for it, but we can talk about that more as we get there. And I just also want to review on the syllabus a couple of your main projects for this class. So you're demonstrating these lessons. So we're just going to do this for the Wednesdays, as we're going to just divide into kind of groups and just take turns presenting something that we would be teaching. If you haven't taught the language before, like, don't worry about it. Just like show us something that you would use to teach something. And then we'll talk about ideas on things we might sort of use. And so our whole goal is like, how could we just, if we're all collaborating, how could we make this thing maybe even better? And that's not saying that it's anything wrong with it. Like, a lot of times when you try to suggest things, people get a little grumpy. They'll say, if it's not broken, don't fix it. We're just like, can't we just talk about improving things? But then you have 3 things you'll turn in during finals week, okay? So during finals week, you will turn in a personal teaching philosophy. So if you were going to go work at a school, they would usually ask you for this. It's usually 1 to 2 pages, and it just sort of lays out, what's your approach? What are your beliefs as a teacher? What do you think about correcting people? What do you think about developing and maintaining a classroom or learning environment? Do you have any thoughts on that? So that's something you get to turn, but this is you talking about yourself. So there's no specific template or formula for it. I could show you, we'll go over some examples. You're gonna turn in a program curriculum methodology. So like, what's the plan for your curriculum? And this could be something where you all work as teams. If you want to turn in 1 for Haida, 1 for Tsimshian, 1 for Tlingit, and 1 for Dagenhag, that sounds good to me. That's fine. If there's some sort of disagreement and you feel like there needs to be You want to do your own, or you want to have two. That's not as cool, but it's understandable and it's fine. When we get to one, that'd be great, because you can also practice consensus, which is good. And then an Indigenous philosophy of education. And once we look through the Maori stuff and the Hawaiian stuff, I think we'll have a stronger idea of that, and also the Mohawk stuff. But this is going to define like the values of the program and what it is and why it exists and how it functions. And so it's good to have these things, because you want to have cohesion. You really want to have cohesion. Like, so I would say the numbers of speakers have been in steady decline for all of our languages, right? So Tlingit is probably under 50. I'm not sure where Tsimshian is worldwide, maybe a couple hundred. In Alaska, it might be 4, maybe. Haida is probably 20 or less, perhaps, at this point. So like, if we really want to think of that world where we got speakers in the hundreds, speakers in the thousands, going back to Hawaii, someone told me, they said, I don't remember like the exact time, but I just remember this moment in time where I realized I didn't know everybody who could speak Hawaiian. That's what we want. We just want all the kinds of people to be like, that person's speaking Haida, I don't even know who that is. And so to imagine that world, it takes an awful lot of solidarity. It takes an awful lot of planning and implementation. And so that's the goal with those final projects. It's sort of like, and I'm hope this is more than a class exercise. I'm hoping that this does become the operating principles of these language programs. Okay. Anybody got anything you want to show us as far as curriculum, or do you want to see, like, I got a couple things I could show you, but I got all semester to show you stuff.
I have one that we used today in my Danaka learners group.
Oh, great.
These were made by Ketsu. Her English name is Susan Pascavan. And she made them to supplement our online lessons. So each unit in actuality has a full recording of an elder and a conversation partner having this conversation. And then you can replay them, you can repeat them, you can practice your pronunciation. But when we met as a group over Zoom, we would practice the dialogues with each other. And I really like how she did this. The column on the left is English translation, and then column C, is the Danaka phrase. And then the third column D is like, sometimes we want to put what we're actually doing or how we're really feeling in there. So she put blanks for us. So you don't always have to just say asun for I'm fine. You could say like, like I'm hungry. So it sort of gives you a little bit of opportunity to expand your use of what you know. And we do that too for, not everybody is from Kayakuk, so I might say Kashta, Hut, and Aslan for Caltag instead of Kayakuk. But she did this for all the lessons, all the units, and it's just a really nice reference. You can pull it up anytime just to practice together. So that's all I wanted to share.
That's awesome. Thank you. Is there audio? And there's audio for this, you said?
Yeah, it's on Doyan Languages online, and it's on another website I could pull up and share too.
Oh, sure. If you want to.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So you record your own, like sort of talking in there?
Yeah, for one part of the lesson, you can record your own speech, and these little diagrams that show the vibrations of your voice, it compares the fluent speakers to yours, and there's a little metric that will tell you how good you did. And so you keep trying till it gets in the green. It's kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This is one.
Kirjah Nelson. Bab Okkot Udas. Tlego Baba Noha Netku. Sani Hook Aaron Taresto.
So this is halfway through the lesson. By this point, I had already heard the dialogue, and I'm supposed to know the Danaka phrase for the English meaning. I went into Peter's house. So this one is you're choosing one. It's like a multiple choice. So if you
Tlego Baba Noha Netku.
oh yeah, okay. Anyway, if you went to the start, it would look like this. So this is Marie Yaska and Dewey Hoffman having the whole conversation.
Nin Kani. Kardana Hestet. Dana Neskan. Dani Shots a Gontaredo. Zani Hook Aaron Taresto. Zanda Nokha Tagabas. Tlego Baba Noha Netku. Bab Okkot Udas. Kirjah Nelson. Budan Dakun. Yo Kad Udas. Hodi Kodahi. Aha Sahatlel Kod Atlik.
So anyway, it kind of goes through, and you're supposed to advance your knowledge of the dialogue first by like repeating it, and there's all these different steps.
Wow, that's awesome. Sheesh. Yeah, like dialogue, like really structured dialogue is a really neat way to sort of learn. So you can have basically like these scripted dialogues that sometimes people memorize. I've also seen structures where you have like a whole story and then people tell the whole story and then they keep telling the story. And so it's really neat. Like there's always this balance of people memorizing stuff and then people learning the structure of the language and at what levels are they doing this, because structure can be really slow to learn sometimes, and that really challenges people because you're trying to nest a whole other grammar in there. And I think if you grew up speaking like only English, usually the English brain is really stingy about space and time, and will try and convince you that there's no time or room for a whole other grammar. And that's that the decolonization part, I think, is putting this whole other grammar in there. Even though your brain might say, well, this is a really colonial way to learn a language. It's part of the decolonization is sort of putting that in there. But as a second language learner, sometimes the processes are a little different. But then sometimes you just want to just learn how to say stuff, right? So it's always a balance, because a person can only memorize, you can't memorize an entire language. You just cannot do that. So you have to get to the structure at some point. But fabulous, wonderful. Anyone else got anything you want us to take a look at?
I have something I'm going to try to share.
Okay.
So this is for the first grade class I will be teaching in Ketchikan. They're just starting to have our languages in schools. So they don't have it in my son's class right now. So I volunteer to go teach the language in the class just because I want him to always have language. So this is a song that we learned in Raising Somalia today. So sort of knew some, Dr. Michael created the song this week. So I put it in a PowerPoint for the first grade that I'll be teaching. And I kind of just made this note for myself, how first graders learn. I didn't like the math or the language, so this is the one I liked about the reading, how they build on their memory. And then, so it's counting and eating. So the first one is Gul Gaba. And the way the song goes, it's not appropriate, but the tune is into, what is that song? 10 Little Indians or 5 Little Indians. So that's what the tune is. It's not appropriate, but that's the way it goes. And then Gupal Gaba, so 2. And then Gwili Gaba, my 3. So it's talking about abstract numbers, eating, and introduces blueberries. And then Talp Gaba, 4 blueberries. And then Kushtun Shagaba, my 5 blueberries. So I kept it really basic just because they're first grade. And at first I was looking for just one single picture with 5 blueberries. And then I changed it into where they're able to count all the different pictures. So it's my first time teaching first grade. Normally I teach high school, so this is my first lesson. So any feedback would be great, just because I really don't know what I'm doing.
Hooray. Yeah, anybody got any ideas? I teach mostly adults, but I did work in the language nest and I saw a lot, and I know we build a lot off of existing melodies, and I think that's totally fine. I was very envious in Hawaii how like they had a ukulele and they'll just make a million songs, and they just sort of like that's not even a Hawaiian instrument, but it is now. So I'd always wish like we had claimed some kind of instrument that we could use, but I think drums are totally fine. I think coming up with melodies are totally fine. Am I right in thinking that Smalgich, you count differently depending on what types of things you're counting? Is that right?
Well, so if it's a round object or if it's a long straight object, counting people is different. Counting shoals, canoes is different. I think there's 7. There's one that's not documented, counting potlatch gifts. So that was kept secret from linguists, but I know there's a system out there for counting potlatch gifts.
Oh, wow. Yeah, probably because the potlatch ban was out there. So yeah, so like, and as you all teach, I want you to think about, like, sometimes you're teaching the sounds, sometimes you're teaching names, you're teaching phrases. We want starting points, which are usually kind of names, colors, numbers, but then we always want to move beyond that with students. And not to say you can't do that, but you've got to have a long range vision, which sometimes develops over time as you start teaching kids. And so the way that you teach is always going to be evolving. It's always going to be changing. And even if you're teaching adults, like, it's really interesting to think of, because sometimes you're going to be teaching like the logic of the language, right? The counting system is a logic system. Tlingit has it for carrying verbs. And then there's other things, like whether you say inside the house, in Tlingit depends on whether or not you're inside the house. Like, so if you're in the house, there's a different way you say it than if you're out of the house, but they're both saying in the house, right? So sometimes you've got some logical things that you're going to try to teach people. And as you teach kids, it's going to be interesting because some of them, they're going to naturalize some of that stuff in a way that might be a little bit different for adults, but other times maybe not. So some of the things to keep in mind as you're developing your curriculum and your materials for this class is, one is keep in mind the age group and let us know at the beginning. It's like, all right, I'm going to show you guys this thing just like you did. I'm using this for first graders, and then let us know what their language level is, right? I'm using this at a first grade and they all can speak the language already. That's the dream scenario, but that doesn't mean that's what you have to make right now. You could say, oh yeah, I'm bringing this into the school, and most of these kids don't know anything, so we're kind of starting from the ground up.
One other thing I wanted to add was when I teach adults or high school students that we teach the unique sounds. But my son, like I said, he's in first grade too. We were in a hot kill class last Wednesday and they were teaching all the sounds. And I think there was like 3 or 4 pages, but my son was hitting all the sounds. So I didn't want to start with that because it just came naturally to him. So I didn't want to, for this class, I'm not going to start with unique sounds, even though that's normally what I start with.
Right.
Just because kids are way smarter.
One thing I might like suggest, because I've tried to like teach language in first grade and like lower grade classes, is you almost always have to start out with the concept of respect and culture. Otherwise, and like if you really like hype it up, they seem to really, you know, understand its importance and then like try to be quiet enough to hear it, but they're just so full of energy and stuff. And a lot of times they're just so noisy that you can't even get out the words. And so, but I realized that if you actually pre-teach about the cultural respect aspect of it first and like why it's so important, it seems like they are a lot more apt to hearing you. I don't know if that helps, but I'm sure you've done this before, but if that helps at all. The other thing is give them something to have in their hands.
It will be over Zoom because we're in Juneau now. I was teaching Devin. Devin was crying last night because he missed his dad because we're in Juneau and his dad's in Ketchikan. So I was telling him that we have to stay here because we only have 6 speakers in Somalia. And he said, oh, no, we have 7 because you know how to speak. So let's go home now. But it was pretty cute how to teach the concept of our language.
Aw, poor little guy, but I love that.
A fun way also to harness the energy like you were mentioning and to increase repetition and keep the students involved that you can even do over Zoom is and to burn energy is so after you've counted, like practiced the numbers and pronunciation, having the students pick in that physical activity that they can do, and then you guys all do together, but you count in your numbers as they're doing the activity. So you can call on a student and then they'll say jumping jacks. So all together you jump, like, and so you, in your language, like klech, dech, nuts, like all the way until that number, like we've done up to 10. And then you can call in another student and then they'll pick the activity and then they're burning energy. They're doing repetitious language, counting numbers, and sometimes they'll pick really fun or embarrassing. Like in my case, they picked the floss. I was like, oh no, we're recording this one. So I had to do the floss like 7 times. But it was, it was fun for all the kids. And then it doesn't get too boring for them because they're burning energy and counting repetitiously. So that might be a fun way to use that one.
I don't know how to floss either. I make fun of Devin when he does it and I do something totally different. You're not doing it right, Mom.
Awesome. Well, I hope it goes wonderfully. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Will you guys be too angry if I give you one other thing to do? Can you watch a 45-minute video between now and Monday? Is it too much? Okay, so in the chat, you're too late. I already put it in the chat. Those who hesitate are lost. Is that those who hesitate just get more work? No, yeah, this is a great video though. It should be pretty fun. So this is people from the Hawaiian Medium School traveling around the world to look at different language programs. It's a really great little film. It's about 45 minutes long. I'll send this information out again. I'll send an email to the whole class. I do things kind of fluidly, so just let me know if it's not clear because it's quite often not clear, but usually I got a plan, but then as we talk, then I'm like, oh yeah, there's this thing and this other thing. But this is a really great film. They go to a number of different places and they sort of look at what they're doing with their languages. So this should give you some inspiration, some ideas. We're thinking big picture here. We're thinking of a place where there's going to be a time, I think, and it might be 20 years from now, when we'll say, do you remember when we thought we're going to lose it? And that's what I want us to have, is that conversation. But it is going to require quite a bit of work. And so we're trying to balance our work between the theoretical and the learning about just sort of language revitalization and making and doing stuff, right? So it's there in the link. It's from the, it's part of the Moku'ula Honua conference, which we should all go to at some point. Let's just go to Hawaii. And post COVID, I heard someone the other day refer to this current time as post COVID. I was like, what are you talking about? But we're gonna get there. And when this whole thing is done, we're not pandemic and quarantining anymore. We'll all go to a language conference in Hawaii, and we'll sit in the heat and talk about this stuff in person, which would be great. But in the meantime, don't forget to read those 3 things. Watch this one video. We'll talk about it all on Monday. Those of you who signed up for a spot, you're going to be on deck on Wednesday to move us through some curriculum. Thanks everybody for sharing stuff today. Have a great weekend.
Managan Kingo.
Christy.
Okay.
Yeah, again.
Tea.